Hey there, pirates. Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Roger knew his time was running out long before we ever heard him say it. The phrase, "my time is running out," in chapters like 550 and 966 wasn't just a reflection on his health. It was a farewell in progress. And the way he acted after realizing that might have been his final adventure. Not across the seas, but in his choices. We see this when he visits Rouge, already ill, when he entrusts his final request to Garp, and especially in the way he speaks to Rayleigh before setting out on that last journey. Roger was always someone who did things his own way, but he also listened, and the decision to leave Ace with Garp instead of Rayleigh might have been one of the few he made against what his heart was screaming, because his heart, I think, wanted to leave him with Rayleigh. Rayleigh was his closest friend. He was the man always by his side. He was the first mate, but more than that, he was the wall Roger leaned on when his thoughts got too heavy. Rayleigh knew Roger in a way no one else did. He understood the words Roger didn't say, he understood the silences, and maybe because of that, because he knew all of that, Roger looked at him and thought, I can't give this to you, because Rayleigh would have accepted. He would have taken care of Ace, and maybe he would have suffered more than anyone else. If we go back to chapter 966, when Odin joins the crew and Roger finally starts showing more of what he's feeling, there's a scene that might say more than it seems. Rayleigh is silent, just watching, and Roger starts laughing. But Roger's laugh already has a different weight. We feel that he's carrying something on his shoulders, maybe already thinking about what comes next. And if he knew Odin would return to Wano, that those bonds would soon be broken, he was already thinking about the legacy, about what would come after the final line. Not the treasure, but what he'd leave to the world. And maybe that's the point. Ace wasn't just a son. He was a risk. He was an inheritance no one had asked for. He was the weight of a name that still carried sparks of fear, fury, memory. Roger's name still burned in the mouths of the Marines. And even with the laughter he left at the end, his scar on the world ran deep. And if he left Ace with Rayleigh, that boy would grow up in the same fire. He would grow surrounded by his father's memories. He'd grow up idolizing Roger, even if he didn't mean to. He'd grow up hearing stories, secrets, adventures that might make him feel a duty, a pressure, a mission he never chose. And Roger, who maybe understood too late that he didn't choose to become a legend, that others made him into one, maybe he didn't want that for his son. And Rayleigh, being who he is, might not have been able to hide it. Might not have been able to say, I won't tell, because Rayleigh is too loyal, too faithful to memory. And if the boy asked, what was my father like, he would tell him, and he'd tell it beautifully. With tears in his eyes, with a tight chest, with too much truth, and that would shape Ace in a way Roger didn't want. Maybe he wanted his son to grow up hating him, or, at the very least, free from him. To not carry the burden of expectation. To not try to be a king, or a hero, or a symbol. None of that. Just to be, just to live. And that's why he chose Garp. Because Garp was his opposite. Because Garp was the iron wall who wouldn't tell stories, who wouldn't let the boy sail, who might even hate what Roger had been. But deep down, he was good, he was fair, he was strong. And if Ace grew up hating pirates, great. If he grew up not knowing who his father was, even better. Maybe in Roger's eyes, Garp was the line separating the boy's fate from everything he himself had lived. Maybe he thought, if it's Rayleigh, Ace will want to go to sea. But with Garp, maybe he'd become a carpenter, a blacksmith, anything far from the sea, far from the same pain. And the cruelest part is that Roger didn't know that sometimes blood finds its way anyway. But in that moment, he made a bet. He bet that Garp, with his rigidity, with his stubbornness, would be the wall. And when we see in chapter 550 that conversation between them, we can feel there was respect there. A respect born from fighting, from coexisting, maybe even from a quiet admiration. Roger knew Garp was someone who, even hating pirates, could take care of a baby. Because Garp, above all, believed in his own sense of justice, and deep down, maybe he believed in children. Because Garp also protected Luffy, tried to give him a normal childhood, tried to keep him away from the sea, even if he failed. And maybe Roger saw that. I think there's an unspoken part to all of this, an intention Roger maybe never put into words. Not to Rayleigh, not to Rouge, not even to Garp. An idea that grew in him after Laugh Tale, when he discovered what the Void Century was, who Joy Boy had been, what that smile that echoed through the ages really meant. Because after reaching the end of the world and laughing, he also cried. Cried because he realized he was too early, that it wasn't him, that the story the world needed wasn't his. And maybe in that moment, something broke inside him, not out of frustration, but out of acceptance. And from that acceptance, maybe hope was born. Not for him, but for someone after him. And that someone, in his mind, might have been his child. Chapter 9. 167 makes it very clear that Roger understood it wasn't his time. And if it wasn't his time, he needed to make space for someone else. Not as a symbol, but as a path. And I wonder if, when he found out he would have a son, he saw in that child the chance to complete what he had started, not as an heir, but as destiny. Because maybe Roger came to understand that Joy Boy wasn't a name, wasn't a title, wasn't some mystical reincarnation. It was a spirit, a way of being, a sound that echoed from time to time in the hearts of the right people. And maybe he believed for a moment that this spirit could live in his son. But Roger also understood that if he forced that mission on the boy, he would destroy any true chance of fulfillment. Because Joy Boy cannot be pushed, cannot be built with words. He has to rise from silence, from struggle, from pain, from choice. And maybe that's exactly why he chose not to leave the boy with Rayleigh. Because Rayleigh, by telling the story of the father, by keeping the spirit of Roger's pirates alive, might have created an heir. But Roger didn't want an heir. He wanted a spark. He wanted a seed scattered in the world. Something that could grow far from the old root. Because maybe he thought the root had been beautiful, yes, but also painful. And that the new cannot be born in the shadow of the old. And that's where Garp's choice gains new weight. Because Garp was the barrier between the boy and the legacy. He was the shield. He was the silence. Garp wouldn't tell stories. He wouldn't let the boy believe he needed to become something. Garp would raise him as an ordinary boy, maybe even with too much harshness, but with a kind of raw honesty that Roger's world never had. And maybe Roger wanted that, for the boy to feel anger, to have his own will, so that if he ever went to sea, it would be by his own impulse, not to follow in his father's footsteps. And if that happened, if even without knowing, without being shaped as an heir, Ace decided to go to sea, then maybe he would be the chosen one. Because the chosen one is not the one who inherits the throne. It's the one who builds their own. When Ace sets sail, when he creates the Spade Pirates, when he challenges Whitebeard, when he builds his own name, all without knowing who his father was, we see a spark of someone who isn't trying to be anyone else. He's trying to be himself, and maybe, ironically, he came closer to what Roger wanted than he ever would have if he'd grown up in Rayleigh's arms. Because Ace grew up angry. He wanted to prove his worth, not because he was someone's son, but because he was himself. And in doing that, he may have come dangerously close to becoming what Roger dreamed of seeing blossom in the world. Someone who would change everything without the weight of bloodline. But the world wasn't ready, and time, once again, was cruel. And maybe Roger, if he had lived, would have said, "I came too early," and so did he. And the truth is, Ace, with all the potential he had, may really have been the chosen one. But he was also human, and the weight of the name he hated found him anyway. In chapter 574, when he finally says he doesn't regret being born, that moment hurts more than any blow. Because it means he spent his whole life thinking he shouldn't have existed. And maybe that's where Roger's plan fails. Because in trying to protect the boy from expectations, he also left him vulnerable to doubt. And doubt is quiet. It grows without us noticing. It bites in the dark. Maybe Rayleigh, with his disguised tenderness, could have given Ace the kind of love that heals that doubt. But maybe in doing so, he would have also given him the burden of a destiny he didn't choose. And it's in that paradox that Roger's decision becomes impossible to judge coldly, because he did the best he could, in a twisted way, yes, but with intention, with heart, and with a kind of hope that only those who know they'll leave too soon are capable of feeling. And when we look at Luffy, who ends up inheriting everything, who only hears Roger's name from afar, who never carried that weight directly, maybe he's the one who best embodies the spirit of the Joy Boy Roger dreamed of. Because Luffy doesn't want the throne. He wants freedom. He wants to eat. He wants to laugh. He wants to live. And that's exactly what makes him the chosen one. Because Joy Boy, in the end, might not be the strongest, the fastest, or the one who carries the legacy. Maybe he's just the one who laughs the loudest, the one who never bows, the one who reaches out even to his enemy. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.